let's talk about the back side of your brute jetter and how to bring water to it. Number one, we have a garden hose inlet right here, and we can see a little strainer in there. So we simply can use a garden hose and feed this, we call the buffer tank. Now this has a float valve in it, just like a toilet tank. When it's full, it's going to shut off. So you don't have to worry about babying the water level on this. It's not a water supply tank, it's a buffer. What do we mean by that? Well, like this is a 12 gallon a minute jetter, or again, you might have the 9 gallon a minute model. That's a lot of water. This is a 12 gallon tank. The float valve shuts it off at about the 10 gallon level. So if you think about it, if you have a 9 or 12 gallon a minute jetter, you're pretty much emptying this in a minute, okay? So you're always feeding it with water. So here we have a garden hose. I'm using a nice big 3/4 inch garden hose, which we highly recommend. Stay away from little 5/8 hoses. And by the way, this is also an industrial rubber hose, so even if it gets dead kinked, it remembers right back. Highly recommend more of a commercial industrial rubber water hose. One thing I don't recommend is, like, this one has been dragged and beaten up, and the threads are kind of beat up, so it's a little hard to thread in there. I have to really kind of tighten it. So don't allow your garden hose to be dragged around. It will beat up those threads. I'm not even going to tighten it all the way up. So here again, when I seal this up, and if this is inside your van, you might want to snug this with a wrench. Garden hose gaskets do wear out. Keep some extra garden hose gaskets with you, so it doesn't drip all over your van. Now at this point, we cut the water on. The tank will fill up, the float valve will shut it off, and now it works as a buffer, this tank does, so that if you're jetting along, you're consuming, say, 12 gallons a minute. If your water supply is only giving you, say, like 8, it's going to draw down a bit. We have other videos that talk about that, what we call tank drawdown. So if you run out of water, you can just pause your jetting, especially easy with a wireless remote. Just kill and let it catch up real quick, and then you can start over again. That's why we call it a buffer tank. Okay, for those of you that have an auxiliary water tank, whether you bought it from us or you've provided your own auxiliary water tank, we've got to make some changes so you can draw water from that other tank. So obviously I've taken the garden hose off. We're not using that. So let's go down here. This plug right here is the auxiliary inlet. So first thing you'll do is take that off, and that provides you 1¼ inch threads. I'm not going to get into those connections right now. That's an extensive video, but we've got a link below for you on making a connection to an auxiliary water tank. In fact, we've got a couple videos. One covers our brute 60 gallon portable tank, which has cam couplers. And then there's the one covering our skid mount tanks for our van packages. And you can use that as a guideline also if you provided your own water tank. I will say this though, this is 1¼ inch, and for larger tanks you want to step that up at least one size. Like in our videos, we step it up to 1.5 inches. But on the in-between, we've got to make a change here, and this is covered in the other video, but I'm going to cover it real quickly. If we're not drawing from this tank, we need to cut it off and cut it out of the system. So we're just picturing we've got a hose or pipe connected here from our larger auxiliary water tank. We're going to close this valve to cut this tank off, because we can't draw from this tank and another tank at the same time unless they're at the same level. Well, just don't. So we take this knife valve, cut it off. Now this tank is out of play, and we're drawing water from your auxiliary tank. Next, we want to return water. This connection is the return line. We don't want to return water to this tank when we're drawing water from a tank over here, right? So all we have to do is grab this yellow handle for this valve and point it toward the auxiliary tank. Now this bypass, and this will be quick connected or connected with a return hose. Now we're returning hose to that tank and drawing water from the auxiliary tank, creating that nice bypass loop that we talk about when the machine is running, but it's not jetting.